Good evening and welcome to the public board meeting of the Board of Education for SD 72 Campbell River on this October 15th, 2024. The school board offices are schools on both in Campbell River and on Quadra are on the territories of the League of First Nations, the Weebulkai and Weebulkum. But School District 72 also encompasses the traditional territories of the Plahoose on Cortez, the Comox in the Saywood region, and the Homolko in Butte Inlet. We would like to express our gratitude for the First Peoples of these lands for maintaining this beautiful landscape so we may live, work, and play here. My name is Kat Eddy, and I'm going to start this evening with Board Chairperson's remarks. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Board of Education. I hope that everyone had an opportunity over this beautiful fall long weekend to enjoy time with family. As we lead up to this provincial election, to the provincial election's final voting day on Saturday, October 19th, I would like to take this opportunity to highlight some of the challenges, both historical and emerging, that we have seen in the K-12 education system. The K-12 education system holds children's success as the key deliverable and core belief of educational programs across our province. Governed by the School Act and overseen by the Ministry of Education and Childcare, we as elected trustees are responsible for governance matters of our local system and advocate on behalf of our communities in relation to the public education of children. In preparation for this election, BCSTA, which is our BC School Trustees Association, has highlighted three key priorities to all political parties that impact districts throughout our province. These challenges are both historical and emerging, and need a government that will work with the education community as allies to plan and assist with overcoming them. Recruitment and retention of staff is a historical and ongoing challenge, especially in more northern and remote districts. Although not as stark a challenge in SD 72, teacher shortages and long-term retention of staff leave classrooms understaffed and children underserved. We advocate for expansion of teacher training programs and increased resources to recruit and retain Indigenous teaching staff. A well-supported workforce is vital for learners so they can realize success in their educational journeys. Another area of concern is adequate capital and deferred maintenance to support the aging infrastructure, repairs, and seismic upgrades of BC school buildings. Capital investment to upgrade schools has been deferred by multiple governments over many years and is reaching a critical point. Although each district is allotted capital funds on a yearly basis, these funds are targeted for building wear points such as roofs and heating systems. We ask government to fully assess infrastructure needs across the province and develop an ongoing funding model and plan to invest in BC schools. And finally, inclusive education ensures that every learner, irrespective of their background or ability, has the opportunity to succeed. Student success is the reason that the public education system exists. This includes providing opportunities for academic success, social and emotional safety, and culturally responsive learning environments. We advocate for resources and programs supported by funding that address the diverse needs of children to ensure that every learner can thrive. Public education is the cornerstone of our democratic society, equipping learners with the knowledge and skills necessary to become informed and engaged citizens. Again, the final day to vote is Saturday, October 19th, with advanced voting stations in Campbell River open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily until then. If you are unsure where you can cast a ballot, please Google Elections BC and a list of locations is provided. Please use your voice and vote. Thank you.
It's not tomorrow, Wednesday. Yeah.
I'm sorry, the last day of advanced polls is Wednesday, and then the final voting day is Saturday. Thank you, Trustee McMahon, for correcting me. On to Superintendent's remarks.
Thank you, Board Chair Eddy. I just wanted to start my remarks with a bit of a Thanksgiving Day comment because we just came off the Thanksgiving long weekend. And, to your remarks, Chair Eddy, I think, we're all thankful that we live in a society that has free elections. And I know personally, I'm very thankful to be in a school district that serves approximately 5,600 students on a daily basis. And the fact that public education is responsible for educating those students and the vast majority of students in BC. So it's great to be able to work with them and when I make my board comments, I usually look at where we've come from our last board meeting to this board meeting and what's coming in between this board meeting and the next board meeting. So it's with gratitude that I'm sharing some of the events that are going to be happening in the near future. Tomorrow at the Big House, we have a presentation called Journeying Forward, and it's really a preparation for all of our Indigenous 12 grads. They're meeting in the Big House tomorrow and going to be given a presentation by several elders in preparation for their journey as grade 12 students, hoping that they will all cross the stage in June and be successful. We're going to be speaking later on in this meeting about the festival report that talks about our completion rates, so that will tie in nicely. We also have a cross-country run for elementary and middle school students happening on October 22nd. A new employee welcome that's happening on October 22nd, something we're trying to reinstitute, and our HR department is really working hard so that we give people that are new to our school district a welcome and provide them with information that they'll find necessary in their journey moving forward in our school district. And at the end of the month, we have our long-term recognition ceremony on October 30th at the Maritime Heritage Center. Always a fun event, and looking forward to that as well. So those are just some of the things that I'm grateful for and looking forward to before our next board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Manning. Moving on to approval of the minutes of the meeting of September 24th, 2024, and the motion reads that the minutes of the meeting of September 24th, 2024 are hereby approved as circulated. Trustee Hagan, seconded by Trustee McMahon. All those in favor? Is there any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, asking for additions or alterations to the agenda. And the motion for approval of the agenda reads that the agenda is hereby approved as circulated. Moved by Trustee Gillis and seconded by Trustee Harper. All those in favor? Thank you. And report of board decisions from the October 15th, 24 confidential board meeting. Vice Chair Gillis.
Yes, we had a meeting that focused on teaching, administrative and support staff changes, property, legal and situations.
Thank you, Vice Chair Gillis. 8A under correspondence is an acknowledgement of the receipt of form letters regarding childcare. And just a comment that did come through an advocacy website, so there was no way to respond to them on behalf of trustees. No public submissions or agenda submissions. And on to electorate and board matters, 11A, vision, mission, and value survey analysis. Superintendent Manning.
Okay, thank you, Chair Eddie. This evening, the board has an opportunity to look at the latest survey we had regarding mission, vision, and values. The first survey that took place happened in the spring, and we had over 713 people responding to that initial survey. The survey we did this fall has 944 total participants. I was going to throw that up on the screen. I'm not sure if I'll be able to do that just now, but what is compiled for all the trustees may look somewhat complicated, but I'm going to explain it and run through it, give you an opportunity to have a discussion, to vote on your choices, and then at the end, the vice chair, I believe, is going to make a motion with the recommended choices for you. I'm just going to throw it up here just to see if it's better to have it up in the front while we're doing this. Okay. That's pretty small, so you probably want to refer to your package. So what happened was we sent out to the public this fall 3 choices for a vision statement, 3 choices for a mission statement, and 3 choices for a value statement. We got all that information back and we eliminated the lowest voted for choice. So what you have in front of you tonight are the top 2 choices in all of those areas, vision, mission, and values. If you look at your chart, the very first one, let's look at that first. What you have is the group of people who voted and by what percentage they voted for the statement. The statement, preferred mission statement, is the next thing that's listed. And the last column states the percentage of people that voted that statement was good as written and they didn't want any wordsmithing. So if you look at the very first one, the three possible vision statements were an inclusive community where every individual can grow, excel, and contribute, a responsive and dynamic learning environment where all students can realize their unique potential, and a community that honors diversity and fosters connections, ensuring equitable opportunities for all learners. You can see based on the chart that the very first one, an inclusive community where every individual can grow, excel, and contribute, was eliminated based on the responses from the survey. So what we have in front of us is the two remaining choices. I wanted to point out to you that 39% of the students chose a responsive and dynamic learning environment where all students can realize their unique potential. 50% of the parents chose that, and 50% of the community chose that. I just want to point out to trustees that if you were looking at the second paragraph, you'll note that the vast majority of responses were from parents, 665. There were 191 responses from staff, 76 from students, and 12 from community. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about the total number of people who chose those options. So where you might be a little bit thrown off is the fact that, you look at the second choice, 38% of the staff chose a community that honors diversity and fosters connections, ensuring equitable opportunities for all learners. What is not shown in this column is what the rest of the staff, other than that 38% voted for, what the rest of the students voted for, what the parents voted for. Those were the top choices by those groups. That's what's represented in column 1. Okay. So when we look at this, I'm wondering, a question for trustees. We can go through each section, vision, mission, values, one at a time, and do our vote and put it into the final motion. The final motion will consist of all three choices written together. I wanted to point out to the trustees that this is a little bit of wordsmithing, and everything that's written here is good. It's not like you're choosing a bad one, a good one over a bad one. This is just trying to be transparent. And in the efforts to be transparent, I hope it didn't cause confusion with a lot of percentages and a lot of extra information. But for instance, in this first vision statement, what it's telling me is that the second statement resonated more with staff, and when I read it as a former teacher myself, I think that it's worded in a more teacher voice. If you read that, you see that's what teachers believe they do for students on a daily basis. Hence, that is probably why they voted for that. The top statement is a little bit more global, but it probably represents more the way students feel about what they're looking for in a vision and what parents feel they're looking for in a vision. Community members, although 50% voted for it, that's 6 people, because there was a total of 12 community members that were outside the public. So I leave it open for questions if people want to ask questions. Sharon?
Sorry, I just have a quick question. The vision, mission, and values are written for everyone that engages with the educational community. And I think that it's important that when we're looking at these responses, that we recognize how many responses we got from parents and caregivers and kids. They actually really engaged in the process, and if they prefer a more global statement, it's something to keep in mind, because it builds those connections between the school community and the user community of our parents and kids.
And just something else I'll point out is, because 38% of the staff chose that second item, that when you look at that, that leaves a large percentage that either chose the first one that was eliminated or this second one that's there as well. We didn't put in the percentage of staff that also chose that top one. And I just want to emphasize that all of these statements are good statements. You can see by the last column, when we have 96%, 85%, 60%, 90%, those are high percentages of people who agree with that statement, written exactly the way it is.
Oh, trustee Glass and then.
I feel like the second statement is a reflection of the first one in practice. And that's how it would look in practice. But the first one is definitely, I think, what parents and community would like to see. So does that make sense? Okay. So I like them both, but I think maybe, the one that parents and students can relate to maybe is probably the one that, makes sense.
Thank you, trustee. Thank you, trustee Gladys. Trustee Harper.
Just so I'm clear here, so the second call percentage that said it was good as written. Let's just say for argument's sake, irrespective of whether a parent chose that statement, 85% of them, irrespective of which one they chose, said it's well written.
No,
No?
85% of those that chose that statement said
Okay.
it's written the way it is, not any of the other two. Yeah.
Trustee Gillis.
Yeah, it's, a challenge because my first choice isn't there. However, putting that aside, the second statement again, and I guess maybe it comes with how comfortable we are with certain words, but I really love the whole concept of equity because I believe we talk in our strategic plan, we talk about our equity commitment. And it also honors, I love the concept of diversity because in this era, we are really trying to acknowledge the vast array of needs of our students and of our community members. So I guess, and not to throw a wrench in anything, because I think we have to respect what the, I guess, larger portion of people have identified as speaking to that. But I did just want to put those thoughts out because those words, diversity and equity, really spoke to me.
I think that those are both reflected in each of the value statements. So even if we don't choose, we're kind of saying the same thing
Yeah.
twice. If we choose that one. We'll be there.
Equity is intact. Thank you.
Any further comments? Trustee McMahon.
I think we all will have our opinions and our favorites, but we asked for this kind of input, so I think we need to listen to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is well said. So what would you like us to do? Okay,
Just for mission. Vision.
for the vision statement, may I have a vote from the table that we go with the higher percentage statement of responsive and dynamic learning environment where all students can realize their unique potential? May I have a vote, please? We have 5.
Did we have a motion on this, or did we need a motion, or would we just come to consensus?
Yeah, but the motion is gonna come at the very end, that you accept all three as your
Okay,
vision, mission, values. Okay.
That work?
that works.
Okay, so we have agreed that the new vision statement in response to the surveys is a responsive dynamic learning environment where all students can realize their unique potential.
Okay, we'll move on to the mission statement. So the 3 possible mission statements for students: number 1, students equipped with the skills and knowledge to be future ready, empowered, active contributors to society. Number 2, to foster individual growth, well-being, and a strong sense of community, preparing students to thrive in a dynamic world. And number 3, to develop well-rounded individuals who are prepared to meet the challenges of the future with resilience, responsibility, and respect. And based on that, you can see that the one that was eliminated was the middle one, to foster individual growth, well-being, and a strong sense of community, preparing students to thrive in a dynamic world, was eliminated. And in the next set of data, you can see that to develop well-rounded individuals who are prepared to meet the challenges in the future with resilience, responsibility, and respect. 38% of the students chose that, 49% of parents, 51% of staff, students 100% who chose that, like the way it was written, parents 94%, staff 96%, community 44%. Just a reminder that that was 12, there were 12 people in the community, chose students equipped with the skills and knowledge to be future ready, empowered, and active contributors to society.
Well, is there any discussion around these statements? I believe that the percentages speak very loudly, but let's put it to the table. So our new mission statement will read to develop well-rounded individuals who are prepared to meet the challenges of the future with resilience, responsibility, and respect. May I have a vote, please? And so moved.
Okay, and then the last one is the possible new value statements. There were 3 once again. And this one was a little bit different because there was a difference in style between these. So number 1 was learning is, some were statements and some were just individual words. So the first one, learning is central, equity is integral, diversity is celebrated, responsibility and respect are fundamental. Number 2, learning comes first, equity is key, diversity is valued, responsibility and respect are essential. And number 3 was a selection of 3 of the following words: respect, growth, inclusion, equity, community, and responsibility. Based on the responses, you can see that number 3 was eliminated. It was not selected. So the choice is between 2 of them. And this one's very interesting in that students overwhelmingly chose 1, and staff, parents, and community overwhelmingly chose the other. I think the big difference is students seem to opt for the simpler language, and staff, parents, and community opted for the more educational language. So yeah, I don't know if we want to have a discussion over this.
Discussion?
Give us a minute.
In a moment to ponder.
Once again, the percentages were extremely high by all groups who liked the way the statement was written.
There's only 1% difference between the students in the first one to the second one. So, and the second one seems to be, stronger. Not the second.
No, we also have students.
Oh, no.
Do we
Oh,
assume
sorry, students don't have students, yeah, you're right.
54% of students,
Right.
like, is it the remaining from 46% that then would go into the second?
So 46% of the students chose that statement. And then the remaining 2 chose, or the remaining percentage chose between the other 2.
Okay,
And we don't have what those were, but we know that the third statement was eliminated because it was the lowest choice.
okay, so
When we look at that 944 participants, that is overwhelmingly parents.
Yeah.
Correct. So that's the largest representation.
Okay, but good representation from staff and students.
Yeah.
Because there were 191 staff, 76 students.
Well, at the risk of stating I think the obvious, I do think sometimes we are a bit jargonish in our language, and I do like the concept of keeping the phrasing what is meaningful for students, because that is who we are serving and supporting. And so I just put it on the table that maybe we go with first choice. The learning comes first, equity is key, diversity value.
Trustee Harper?
I agree with Trustee Gillis. The second one, although the meaning may be the same on those 2 sentences around equity, I don't think that they necessarily are taken the same way, because one is very clear meaning and one is a little more ed speak.
Any further discussion? Are we ready for a vote? Okay, and we can vote on both statements if that's, so the first vote is on the first value statement that learning comes first, equity is key, diversity is valued, responsibility and respect are essential. All those in favor? Right, so moved. So the final motion,
Yes.
Vice Chair
I
Gillis,
move that the board adopt the following statements as their updated mission and values. The first being a responsive and dynamic learning environment where all students can realize their unique potential. That is our preferred vision statement. Mission statement would read as to develop well-rounded individuals who are prepared to meet the challenges of the future with resilience, responsibility, and respect. And our preferred value statement would include learning comes first, equity is key, diversity is valued, and responsibility and respect are essential.
may I have a mover? Trustee Gladish, seconded by, is there any discussion? Seconded by trustee McMahon. All those in favor? Awesome. So moved. That was fun.
Thanks for all the hard work.
Yeah, just before we move forward, I'd like to thank everyone who participated. The mission, vision, value statements will be recrafted and will be distributed as a insert into our strategic plan until the next printing of our strategic plan, where we will replace our board commitment statement with the new mission, vision, and values. Thank you for participating in the process. It does guide all of the work that we do in the school district, and parent and student voice and staff voice, of course, is very important. On to educational submissions. Superintendent Manning, the framework for enhancing student learning.
Thank you, Chair Eddie. And before I go on, I would be remiss if I didn't thank Jennifer Patrick for all of her work on this mission or vision, mission values statement. She did a lot of heavy lifting and really appreciated all the work that she did. So thank you very much, Jennifer.
It's just presentation.
No, he hasn't done presentation.
Just unplug something and lose power here.
Stop.
This is the guy?
Yeah, it's one, and then to check on something. Thank you.
This can be one. And let's see if this thing works. So you're gonna be tired of hearing me talk by the end of tonight for sure. This is all about festival report that we submitted just prior to September 30th this school year, and it reflects all the data we received from last school year.
Vessel stands.
VESSEL stands for the Framework for Enhancing Student Learning. It doesn't say you work.
Oh. Yeah.
I'll just snap. So that is the cover page of our school district enhancing student learning report. I would like to just point out that I'm summarizing as quickly as possible 72 pages of a report that exists on our district website, and I will show you exactly where you can find that, and all of the finer details of what I'm going to speak to tonight can be found there if you really want to dive into the data. So the framework for enhancing student learning is due to the ministry by September 30th of every year. And the purpose, the ministry tells us, is that it provides a yearly touch point for districts to analyze student learning based on data that the ministry gives us, to reflect on last year's progress, and to look toward meeting your strategic priorities, and to plan for the coming year, adjust, make changes where changes are needed. And it consists of two parts. Part A is all the data that the ministry gives us, and that includes FSA information from grade 4 and 7, grade 10 numeracy and literacy information, graduation rates, and transitional rates from grade 10 to 11 and grade 11 to 12. Section B is what our response is as a district to the data that we've received. So we receive the data, we interpret it, and we say, okay, here's some gaps, here's some things to celebrate. What do we want to do moving forward as a school district to improve student achievement? When you see this ministry data that I'm about to show you, those are the categories of students that it shows. All students means every student in the district. All Indigenous students means students who live on reserve and off reserve. We also have stats for Indigenous students on reserve separate and Indigenous students off reserve separate. Children and youth in care, which is CYIC, you'll see on the as an acronym when you're looking at this information, and students with disabilities or diverse abilities. Those are all the data sources and data points that the ministry gives us back. And what the ministry is actually reporting on is intellectual development, human and social development, and career development. Those are the three pillars that they look towards. Under intellectual development, we have literacy and numeracy, and that's the grade 4 and 7 FSA, the grade 10 literacy and numeracy results. Under human and social development, it's whether students feel welcome, safe, and connected, and that is found in the student learning survey. Student learning survey consists of about 75 questions. These are some touch points that the ministry feels very important, and so they give us specific data on that. And then career development consists of graduation, and the ministry reports and gives us back the 5-year completion rate. And then life and career core competencies is how many students are transitioning to post-secondary. So where can you find this information? If you go to our main district website on the main page, you go to the top tab header that says what's happening. Underneath what's happening is a drop down that gets you to reports and publications. You will see enhanced student learning reports, and you will see the 2024 SD72 framework for enhancing student learning and a bunch more from 2023, 22, 21 that are existing on our website. And that's where you find that this particular report is 72 pages. So that's where you will find the entire report. Here's what you'll see in the data section. I'm going to try to explain this. There's a big bunch of squiggly lines there. On the right is the provincial numbers. On the left is our school district. And the blue bar is all resident students. That's everybody. The orange bar is all Indigenous students. The dark green is Indigenous on reserve. The light blue is Indigenous not on reserve. Purple is for children and youth in care. And you'll see that we don't have that on our side. That's because those results have been masked because there's too few students that took the grade 4 literacy test to be able to score. What the ministry typically says is if you have a cohort of less than 10 students, that data will be masked because it's too easy for people to figure out who that's speaking about. It's not anonymous anymore. And then resident students with designation is the lighter green color. So what is this telling us? There's a summary at the end, but really when you look at this, you can see that our data is lower than the provincial data. You know, if you're looking for positives, you see that Indigenous students on reserve took a big uptick from 2023 to 2024. This line here is moving up and is actually above it. But for the most part, in general, we're dipping below the provincial average in grade 4 literacy FSA scores. We moved to grade 7 literacy. It's the same kind of story. We're below the provincial average. Once again, our CYIC resident students are masked because children in care don't show up. There's two particular tests to be able to show the results for that. And this is reflective all the way from 2018-19 all the way to 2023-24. If we move on to grade 10, similar, but what you'll notice in grade 10 is that we only have data up into 2022-23. The grade 10 data comes to us a year late. So we're eagerly waiting to see what is our 23-24 data. So this would be actually the year before last year's data, but the trend is not looking good from 21-22 as it moved into 22-23. We're hoping that rights itself when we get next year's data. This is numeracy scores. So numeracy, I would say from a district perspective, the good news is it seems to be trending back up from trending down in 2022-23. A big spike for Indigenous students on reserve. moving above the provincial average. But once again, the rest of the scores are below the provincial average, but at least they're moving in a more positive direction. Grade 7 numeracy, not as positive, a little bit of a downtrend there. And for in this particular case, especially with students with designations, for some reason, have been plummeting since 2021-22. And once again, our children and youth in care data is massive.
But Indigenous students on reserve, very,
Yeah, Indigenous students on reserve much higher than the provincial average. So that's an interesting statistic as well. And then grade 10 numeracy assessment pretty well mirrors the provincial numbers at the end. You know, there are exceptions once again with students with designations are quite a bit lower. But the end results are similar to the provincial averages. And I showed this one together, a little smaller. This is transitions from grade 10 to grade 11 and grade 11 to 12. Our grade 10 to 11 transitions are actually higher than the provincial average. And our grade 11 to 12 are compared to the provincial average. So we're sitting pretty good. And I believe the next slide will be a summary. Oh, it's just a statement of it's kind of tricky. As I point out that the years fluctuate depending on what data you're looking at. So you tend to look at different years with different data sets. And then when we summarize intellectual development, something I didn't tell you before, but our participation rates for FSA in grade 10 are way above provincial averages. So that's good news for us. We're in the mid to high 90s. We do have lots of students that participate, which should tell us that our data is relevant and accurate. So we have to respond to that data saying, if we know that 95% of our kids are taking these assessments, it's true assessment. It's representing almost all of our students. So I mentioned that both literacy and numeracy are below the provincial average. However, numeracy rates did show an improvement from 2022 to 23 in grade 4, and they were relatively stable from grade 7 when they were compared to that year. And our transition rates were above the provincial average. Human and social development was the second pillar. And I show you this just to show you feeling safe at school. Our results basically mirror the provincial results. They're about the same. This is a nicer one for us in the district. When children were asked, do you have 2 or more adults that care about you? Our trend is going up, and it looks like the provincial trend is kind of on a downswing. But since 2021, 22, it's gone up once again. Notice the end date though is 22-23. So that's 2 years ago, not last year's data, because I saw the data that was the data that was available from the ministry. But hopefully that trend continues. Career development, the last pillar. First of all, graduation. There is quite a bit of separation in our lines on this. Once again, you see that Indigenous students on reserve, huge upswing from 2021, 22 to 22, 23. We're below the average, but for all Indigenous students, for Indigenous students on reserve and Indigenous students not on reserve, we are above the provincial average. And this is the first graph, I believe, that shows a children and youth in care timeline over the entire 2017-18 all the way to 22-23, and we're above the provincial average in that as well. The only one that we're below on is students with designations, so something to look into and see why that's not successful. So, you know, the good news from this standpoint is in the early years we might be struggling, but when it comes to the completion rate, we seem to be catching some of those students up, and we're moving in the right direction on these trends. And then post-secondary transition, this side of the graph shows students who go immediately into post-secondary, and the other side is within 3 years. Fairly close to provincial averages. It's interesting to me to note that a big uptick for students with designations going into post-secondary, for us on a district level. And, within 3 years, the trend is moving up for the most part with the three subgroups that were, able to show that weren't masked. The overall trend is still down, but look at the data for within 3 years. It goes all the way back to 2019, 2020. So that data is pretty old when we're looking. That's data from 3 years ago. But interesting to know trends for sure. So, our feeling connected to school results are 11% higher than the provincial average, and the adults who care is 7% higher than the provincial average. That says good things about our teachers in our district, obviously providing a safe, caring, nurturing environment for students. We are lower overall by 7% in our graduation results, but we do have much higher grad results for Indigenous students on reserve and our Indigenous resident students. And if we look at the 5-year trend for our Indigenous students, it's been on a steady upward trajectory, and we're hoping that continues. Okay, so that was all the data part, and now we're moving into what are we doing as a school district about that data that we just shared? Well, we're relaying it to our strategic plan, and you guys know this very well. Those are our 3 strategic priorities. And we have student achievement plans in all of our schools. They used to be called school growth plans or school achievement plans. We changed it to student achievement plans to reflect the graphic with student achievement at the center, and to reflect the strat plan that you guys have developed with the community. So school plans are tied into the application process, is tied directly into what strategic priorities are you addressing with your school plan. And in order to provide more equity, we are providing that through strategic priority dollars. We have set money aside in the budget to be able to give to schools directly. They will have an application process where they apply for something. If their numeracy rates are really low or their literacy rates, and they want to approve them, they say, here's our plan to approve them. They apply for funding. Most of the funding is used for release time for TTOCs to come in, so teachers can plan and work together to try to address those issues within their school. Some key initiatives when we look at the data. You know, we recently completed the literacy framework. It was 3.5 years in the making. We have a literacy framework document, but we also have a literacy framework resource finder, and that was given to every K-5 teacher in the district. They all have a resource finder that includes documents, planning schedules, phonics and spelling information, and assessment information. It's really quite I know most of you have seen it. It's a quite a intense, full-fledged binder, and we're hoping that teachers are using that, and that will help improve some of those results. Some of the other initiatives, we hired a director of instruction position at senior leadership. That was based on feedback from just about every group in the school district who wanted to see that. They work specifically in curriculum assessment reporting. They're continuing to work with the literacy framework, but they're also developing a numeracy framework. We hired a numeracy lead teacher coordinator position this year as well, who is doing a numeracy review in the district this current year. They've already developed a numeracy anchor chart, and they are working on a numeracy framework, and they have convened a numeracy committee that is going to be meeting shortly, I believe next week, for their first initial meeting that consists of teachers, administrators, the lead teacher and the director. And their major focus for this year is developing a numeracy framework. Another key initiative around Indigenous learning is to really focus on the equity and action plan. We have an overall school district equity and action plan, and we have school reports. One of the things I really loved about this is that if you look at that graphic, it's kind of the flip of the graphic that we have in our strat plan. We have student achievement at the center and equity surrounding the outside. And this has equity in the center with student achievement surrounding the outside. I thought it was interesting when I noticed that, looking at that. There's 4 main areas with the equity and action plan, and our district has a very comprehensive report within this document if you want to look at further details for that. We also have an initiative called The Grandmother's Perspective. And it really basically asked the question, how are Indigenous students doing on their path to graduation? Or through the voice of a grandmother, tell me about my grandchild. Are they on their path to graduation? We have individual school reports for every school in the district. And we have individual nation reports for all of those nations within our district. This is a major focus and topic in tomorrow's principal, vice principal district leadership team meeting. We're going to be spending some time reviewing their pathways to graduation and the grandmother's perspective with all of them, with a real focus on, okay, if we can identify these students who seem to be falling through the gaps right now, how are we going to help them experience success before the end of the school year? And the graphs that the schools get are very visual. You can see it's highlighted in red, yellow, and green. Red meaning the students really needs extra support or help. Yellow meaning they're on their way. Green meaning they're doing great. And every school gets an itemized graph based on the number of students at every grade level from K right through to 12. And key initiatives for children and youth in care of students with designations and working with our inclusive department. They're working much more closely with MCFD this year to really try to pinpoint those children and youth in care, know who they are, because sometimes it's hard to get that mass data. And so they have a good working partnership. They're going to be tracked through MyEd this year, so we know exactly where they are. And there's going to be a development of a school care plan framework that will dovetail with the literacy and numeracy frameworks, and the equity and action work focused on children and youth in care. And then students with designations. Inclusive is looking at systematizing resources to develop the foundational skills, have multi-tiered layers of support, and improved accessibility supports. These are all things that we were looking at based on the data. How do we improve these outcomes for all these different areas? So in conclusion, the full FESL report is found on the website at that location I mapped out. And we're hoping when we get that data that we analyze the data and we're open, honest, transparent about it. Some of the data doesn't tell the best story for us, but it gives us a clear picture on where we need to improve and where we need to put our efforts in. So, and that's all part of this process for why the ministry has put it into place. Are there any questions? Wait, sorry, I know that was a long.
Any questions bubbling to mind immediately?
Not.
And I would encourage you to have a look at it on the website. And if you do have questions that come up, please feel free to get hold of me and do the best we can.
Trustee Gills?
I was just thinking of a question around the actually sharing this report with all of the people within our school system. I'm talking about our teachers, our head assistants, our secretaries, is that primarily the responsibility of each school to encourage and promote?
I could see very easily sharing this information at a district leadership team meeting with all our principals, vice principals, very open to sharing this with the IEC, just so they see it, and pointing out where it resides so they can look at it whenever they want. Thank you. And we are involved also in a learning group for continuous improvement with a number of districts in the province. And we've met, I think, a total of 3 times last year, and we're having our second meeting this year. And it's a group of districts that discuss their personal situations and how to improve and what their measures they're putting in place for continuous improvement.
Trustee Hagan?
Now, the gap between the information that we're getting.
Yeah.
And to the actions that we're taking.
Mm-hmm.
How do we know something's working or not working if we don't get the data back as quickly as, if we're 3 years behind in our data, all the things that we're doing right now may be having a really positive influence.
Yeah.
And we won't know until another 3 years from now or 2 years from now.
We are playing catch up. You're right, Trustee Hagan. We play catch up all the time. What we do have going for us is we have a new data source is relatively new called Power BI that we can access, and we can get extra points of data through that are more current than the data we get from the ministry. So we'll be working on that as well.
So do we have, I'm sorry to ask so many questions, but so do we have, longer periods of initiatives that we're taking, we're not just reacting for 1 year period, but we have like a 3 year test cycle or a 5 year test cycle besides what they're testing?
Yeah, I would say we would have a much longer fight. Like if you look at the literacy results, they weren't great, but you know, we've been working on the literacy framework for 3.5 years. That doesn't mean we're abandoning the literacy framework. That we believe it means we just need to incorporate that even more, and we will eventually see student achievement go up. So we're going to stick with that and keep pushing for it.
One last question on this. So we'll be bringing in line the goals and values that we set up tonight. We'll be lining those up with our plan that we have already in place then. So there'll be some corrections in that as well, I guess.
Yeah.
It's a living document, so I would imagine over the next period of time, we'll be seeing changes as it comes up for review.
Yeah, and I think one of the places where we really will highlight that for us is the children and youth and care, the data that's masked. We're committed to doing a better job of knowing exactly who those students are. And for instance, we can figure out who those students are. So when we get FSA results, we can pull that data as a district and know where they're going and make sure we're putting in equitable supports for them so that their life chances are improving and their student achievement is improving better.
Trustee Gladys.
Not so much questions, but some comments. And I think it's really important for us to be looking at the results of the Indigenous students who are on an upward trend. What are we doing right? Because if we're doing something right, let's keep doing it and maybe see what more we can add to it. And the other thing that I see is the importance in professional development in our district in terms of trying to address those areas that really need some good work and some good focus. So maybe, be interested in what our schools are doing for probate for their teachers. And I really appreciate that there's a focus on releasing them with teachers on call so they can collaborate together, because that's how they're going to kind of help each other out and work with the director of instruction. I'm also looking forward to seeing what will this university framework look like, and when might it be in the hands of teachers, because we really need that addressed.
Further comments? Thank you, Superintendent Manning, for bringing that hard data to us for public disclosure. It's important that we're looking at it regularly so that we know where our governance practices and budgetary commitments lie, because it is in student success. Trustee Manning.
I'm wondering if we might include this on a future agenda, maybe next time, just so that we have a chance to go to the website and look at it in some detail.
Okay, we'll note that for the agenda setting meeting. Awesome. Thank you. Moving on to elected and board matters, 13A board governance policy notice of motion. Vice Chair Gillis.
Yes. Well, as you may all know, our policy committee has been meeting regularly, and we are committed to a robust review of current policies. And as a result of our most recent meeting, we'd like to bring as a notice of motion, policy 16, role of committees and representatives. We've made some recommendations that we are hoping people will have some time to review and accept. I'm certainly open to questions or to suggestions at our next meeting before our final vote. We also included in this role of committees and representatives terms of reference. It was the recommendation of our advisors, Scott Stinson, that we should have terms of reference for the operation of our basically our governance committee, and so those are also included in this in your package. I don't know if anyone has questions at this time, or we just simply leave this as a notice of motion.
Trustee Higgins.
Just a little clarification then. So we'll be accepting all input until what time frame from people in our,
Yeah, this will be on our next board meeting. I believe it's November the 5th.
and does that give enough time for information to come from or, from the organization to say, yeah, we would like to see this happen and that happen within the governance structure?
We can also move it, we can also extend the time frame through first, second, and third reading. So we can bring it forward for first reading at the November 5th board meeting, first and second, or just first, and then provide more time for our educational community to comment on the revisions or not. And then read second and third reading, or second, then third reading at subsequent meetings.
I just think it's quite critical if we were going to take a vote on how we run our district, kind of like we said with our mission, values and statements, that our committees probably should go back and get as much input into what the representation looks like, how people feel connected or not connected with the various committees that we set on. Maybe some committees are redundant.
Yeah, and we have attempted to look at that. You'll see some deletions of previous committees, and also try to reduce. There were some extraneous or repetitious elements in the previous policy. And so we did look at that as well, but certainly we would invite any comment. And I think we have two meetings in November. So as Chair Eddie suggested, maybe we could have our first reading at the November 5th, and I believe it's November 30th was our,
And I'm not.
November 5th, and add 21 November.
It's in November.
I think it's 26. So
Yeah.
if we could do it up for that, and yes, we could really appreciate. We have given this lots of thought, and we're hoping that there's nothing that we've overlooked, but we would welcome any suggestions for further edits.
Trustee what?
One question,
Yes.
in terms of reference for governance committee, the whole thing is struck out. Does that mean we just one, or is there one in the work? No, it's all new.
It's all new, so it's
Oh.
highlighted, and sorry, it doesn't translate in
Oh,
yellow
okay.
in the photocopier. We're saving pennies.
This is new then.
actually. Yes, this is all new,
Okay.
brand new. And there is just one slight, it should read, purpose of the terms of reference for the governance committee, not the audit and risk committee. So that was just a clerical oversight. Yeah.
So this will be found under the board tab on the website, or where do these exist?
Under news and announcements.
Under news and announcements, so anyone who wishes to review the new board governance policies or terms of reference is welcome to do so under news and events. We do have to take a vote to accept the notice of motion?
No.
So we do thank you to the governance committee for your hard work and for your commitment to continuing to go through our policies, our governance policies, and update them. And we'll see you at next meeting for first reading.
We will be a regular feature throughout the year. Aren't you excited about that?
Sure. I'm just excited.
On to educational issues, September 30th, 2024, 1701 enrollment report.
Thank you, Chair Eddie. Just wanted to bring to the board's attention that we did not meet our projections this school year. We were projecting a growth of 50 additional students in the district, which was fairly conservative based on the numbers that we had from our forecasting system. Felt like we were going to meet that, but we actually came in down 23 students for a net loss of over 70 students. Because when we're projecting that 50 growth, and you come in at 23 under that, you minus the 23 from the 50 to get a total net of we're 70 down.
Wow.
So that
Understood.
wasn't the best. We did have a big bubble at secondary, that we seem to have, more students in our secondary schools than we have in our elementary. It was interesting because we actually met our projections at kindergarten. We actually exceeded our kindergarten projections. But the K to 5, and the K to 8 just didn't come in. We had more people move away than we thought were gonna move away. But this is echoed in all the districts up and down the island and further on in the province. We had, Comox and Qualicum both down. Stuk, although growing, was down from, projections. So it just seems to be a trend, that's happening. Disappointing, but we felt like we were able to, cap those losses in a way budgetarily that is going to make sense moving forward. And I know that, Secretary Treasurer Patrick's going to speak to that, next. But if there are any questions about this particular item, happy to take them.
Trustee Hagan.
Yeah, I just would like to note that at one time, I believe our count was, Kevin, at one time, was it around 5,000 students we had in the district?
Yes, at the lowest point, we went from a peak of 8,000 all the way down to just above 5,000.
And so now we sit around 5,600, I believe, somewhere around that number.
Yeah.
Which is still a healthy community, and we're still moving forward. So I wouldn't like it to be said out there that we're out by 23 students or something in the scope of a community growing, or it's just like as if you took a breath in or you inhaled or exhaled. But it's pretty hard to project these numbers, and we've been quite accurate, I have to say, quite accurate in the past.
The positive on the community growth is we did see 70 new students move into the district. Unfortunately, we built our projections off of 150 students, which was from the recommendations of our software or our program demographic planning provider. And so again, other districts face the same thing, likely for similar reasons, which we will be looking into and following up with that software provider. But yeah, are we ready to move on to the?
We are. So 15A, enrolling budget impacts.
So unfortunately, with a miss by that amount, we felt we need to address it budgetary. So based on, we built a budget last spring, based on an expectation we would have 77 more students than what we actually got. So all the additions that we made in spring, we shouldn't have, had we have known. Now, rather than go back and undo a lot of that, senior management team felt like the first thing to do is to take a look at, can you make reductions that don't have job cuts or supply cuts? So I guess for starters, when we take the enrollment decline or the enrollment miss, really, we're down 686. But remarkably, we also we're down in special education and inclusive ed, which was very rare, like very, very rare. But when all is told, we're down $700,000 from what we built our budget on. And so normally, back in the day, we would hit our numbers within 2. It was very accurate. And through the years, we've been getting larger variances. And typically, if we were above 30 or below 30, we wouldn't make any adjustments at this time. We would make those adjustments, roll them into the final budget. But this is a lot. And we felt that with the other pressures of inflation, putting pressures on costs going up, that it would be smart to bring forward to the board and identify some reductions that we could do. So we, now the way, because this is unique, this hasn't been part of the consultation. So we take a lot of pride in our district of having budget conversations and consultation and seeking feedback. And these have not been part of that. So what I would like to do is in order to balance the budget, we've identified these and you can assess what the impact is acceptable at this point. But I propose that we put these back in the budget for next year. And that we have the conversation again about whether they stay or go. So these are out for this year, but they'll be brought back. And structurally, if things don't change, these or an alternative will need to be reduced. So it's in a lot smaller writing, but the big savings on there is a reserve. So as you can see, we didn't even meet our projections. So we had identified 2 staffing positions. These are teacher staffing positions that typically we will allocate out to hotspots. Because we didn't meet those numbers, of course, we didn't need to use that. Now, normally, that 77 means we actually need less staff all around. Our teacher staffing is based on formula, but because the classrooms are set up, we're not going to take away from classrooms. So the only thing that hasn't been used when it comes to teacher staffing was the reserve. So we propose to reduce that. The next one, summer school surplus, is they had a surplus. Let's use it. It doesn't impact any reductions. Some of the things on here, like the e-blend supplies, the school supplies, because we have less students, just naturally, they need less supplies. So again, it's not a cut to each student, but it's just there's less students. Whereas some of them, like the inclusive ed, again, that's a formula based. So we had 5 more, I don't really have it labeled level 1, 2, and 3, but we had 5 less level 2s, requires less support. So we won't be allocating that out. So we've identified it as the one that's probably the biggest sort of new is the annual facility grant. And this kind of goes with the childcare project, but the annual facility grant, we are actually proposing here to move a position out of operations and have it be paid for out of our annual facility grant. So in any given year, we have 2 positions being paid for out of the annual facility grant. This year, we're going to propose to have 3 out, paid out of it. Again, minimal impacts. And then there's a number of international feeding futures, childcare, summer school. So what that is when these programs run, there's services to support them, whether it's accounts payable, accounts receivable, payroll, those sorts of things. And each of those chargebacks or their admin processing is really, we're just going to reach into those programs and say, okay, we want you to pay for part of the services that you're using. So, so again, it is no loss it's no loss of positions, no cuts to services. But it is something that traditionally we don't do. So, so yeah, that's kind of the unfortunate position we find ourselves in right now.
I didn't quite understand what ERP was.
Oh, yes, the ERP is there. So, our SIM system, so ERP, Enterprise, Resource Program. I just looked, I forgot. So our SIMS program is aging out. The people that run it are getting older, which means they're aging out. That is still a need. We have already set aside money to start saving for it. We had last year approved about 100,000 in an operating budget to continue to save for and pay for it once it's in place. But we have to suspend that for a year.
So
So
this doesn't represent any employees, so.
no.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the only 2 FTEs are the teachers that we were gonna have in the hotspots. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Good.
Okay.
Yeah, big time.
Yes.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, good. It looks good.
That.
You.
Yes, and other districts I know aren't quite as lucky, but and where they're having fines, 700,000. I think Paul just was looking at $1.2 million. A really tough hit.
Kevin, I'm sorry.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Kevin, within your scope of work, you're allowed just to go ahead and make these changes for the 707,000.
So I have asked for a motion on this because we won't add something without coming to the board. And so although this is new, the fact that we're kind of taking something away, I would like support from the board to do these reductions. When we go and we do the final budget, that will be approval from the board that these reductions are recorded in there. But between now and then, I know I'd feel better to know that the board has seen this. It's on record as the board sort of accepting this.
So moved then?
Yep, so the motion reads that the board approve the savings plan due to unexpected enrollment decline as outlined in the proposal. Moved by trustee Hagan. Is there any further discussion? Seconded by trustee Gillis. All those in favor?
Thank you.
So moved. And lost my agenda. That's right. It's lost my agenda. So on to 15B, finance warrant, number 3, September 30th, 2024. So move that finance warrant number 3 dated September 3rd, 2024 be accepted as presented. Moved by trustee Hagan, seconded by trustee Briggs. All those in favor? Thank you. And congratulations to your team, Kevin, for September 30th finance warrant being here for the middle of October. On to 16A committee reports. The Vista conference that a number of trustees attended on October 5th and 5th in Port Alberni. Vice Chair Gillis.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. As you know, we have 2 meetings in the year. This is the Vancouver Island School Trustees. We met or were hosted in Alberni by their school district and by the, I'm sorry if I mispronounced this name, but the Tisashat and the Urapakas, indigenous to that area, because there was a lot of focus on a most wonderful kind of truth to reconciliation pathways. And we shared opportunities to a particular program experience that was very moving was, it was called the Residential School Survivors Art and Education Society. And these were some, it was artwork that had been returned to residents of residential schools from the 50s and 60s. And that art had been returned to them. And so they spoke out that and its meaning, the visionary teacher that they had who had the foresight to kind of collate or collect and then return to them their artwork. And so they have this on display at times. They've done several, but with that's come a lot of the story and the experience that they've had as survivors. So I think we were all very moved by that experience. We also had opportunities to hear a remarkable choir that knows their voice. Their conductor would say, and you see these small children that you thought would have these teensy tiny voices, and I can't remember the exact phrase, but we've all got a voice. They would proclaim, and so I think we were very heartened by the wonderful relationship between various members of the band and the school itself. We had an opportunity to share the wisdom and the experience, the journey of 4 of the superintendents in a fishbowl called How Far We've Come. And they were posed with a number of questions about what people were doing, what they felt they needed to commit to, what differences could make. And we were very honored to know that our own superintendent was in the fishbowl. So I asked him if he was a big fish in a little pond or a little fish in a big pond, but it didn't matter. He spoke with, I think, a lot of confidence and wisdom. And then the next day, of course, we had the opportunity to basically, be exposed to the safe. Many of you may know this. It was, the framing of this was a little bit new to me. It's called Erase. It's ensure respect and a safe education. And it's really the safe schools approach to ensuring that there's a reporting system, that there are codes of conduct in place, and that there's a concerted provincial effort to address a lot of the both in-person and online concerns around bullying and the lack of security sometimes that some students feel. And of course, coming out of this COVID era, if we indeed are coming out of it, it's been a real anxiety and induced experience for a lot of kids. So just knowing that there are helplines and that there are 24/7 opportunities for people to reach out when it's needed, and there's anonymous reporting if people so wish. Yeah, so those are just a few, but hats off to the Pacific Rim School District for its wonderful hosting. I think we just felt really welcome, warmly embraced. And we are looking forward to being the hosts. I believe it's spring 2026. Is that correct?
I think so.
Okay. Well, we don't want a lot of people showing up without a little bit of notice. The date seems to change, but boy, are we going to show them a school district. Hey,
Absolutely.
okay, lock it in.
Did you just volunteer to organize?
Yeah.
Anyway, we thought it was fall 2025, but I believe now we believe.
I thought it was fall 2024. We should
Anyway.
get some information.
It's coming, just like taxes, okay?
They saw you coming, I think is what it was.
I don't know if any of the others who attended something further to add. I wanted to keep this fairly succinct.
I think it's very thorough. It was very uplifting.
Yes.
You know, I always go into discussions about prison reconciliation a little, holding my breath, because sometimes they can be very painful. And this was very hopeful, very uplifting, and I think one of the wonderful messages for me was the power of art in sustaining people in difficult situations. Through everything else that was going on, they had an art teacher that allowed them to be themselves in art class. And that's a pretty powerful message.
There were also some optional activities as well. You could speak with a survivor if you wished, or you could, I know there's a superintendent at the table who had the same, I had my first brushing. I've never been brushed, and someone said, it's really relaxing, and it was relaxing. I almost fell asleep on my feet. So it was wonderful too. They brought us in, and I think it was about 15-20 minutes. It's probably much longer when you don't have a huge lineup, but it just felt very, very warm, very receptive. So yeah.
I really liked the presentation by the healers. So 4 of the healers that were doing the brushing spoke to the society. There is a society of traditional healers on Vancouver Island, and one of the younger members is recording all of the traditional medicines and practices. And they were such an eclectic group. Like, they were just a really fun, eclectic group, talking about the importance of traditional medicines and how it's always been an underpinning in Indigenous community, and how it's so important to continue practicing and continue recording the practices and teaching. They were just such a funny little group of really neat people. Yeah, that's my impression of your brushing.
I think that's what they said about us. Too.
Probably.
Unique people.
Thank you, Vice Chair Gillis. And on to final committee report regarding the Strathcona Regional District Liaison Committee meeting. Trustee Gladish.
Okay. All right, it's not as engaging as Trustee Gillis's report, but I'll do my best here. I have a few notes. So we had the meeting today with the SRD, at Dakota Regional District. And it was actually quite interesting. It seems like they're very interested in, being more collaborative with us in terms of, having access to, if they can, to some of the schools, kitchens, gyms, field space in order to provide more recreation programming. So, it seems like there's a real need to have a discussion with staff here to find out what are those possibilities, what schools are open. And so they also mentioned that Suka and Salt Spring are expanding models for that kind of relationship, that kind of collaboration, expanding access to programs through school use by community members like SRD staff. So there was a good discussion. Secretary Treasurer Patrick is fully aware of how much our schools are used and the potential for, having extra staffing for opening up, locking up, cleaning up, and all that sort of stuff, which SRP hadn't thought about. So there's a real need for more food communication about that in terms of how to make this happen. So I think there's a real interest in that further development. They're also, fully aware of the need for looking at providing some kind of backup power for test school, because they apparently lose power more often than even we do on Quadra. So there's some discussion that should happen about that, maybe some possible grant application so that this could happen, maybe ESS, because they would be using the school property as an emergency center if needed. There's some discussion about properties, which I won't report on in any detail because they're based on some decisions that need to be made in the future with our board. They were also quite interested in the data collection in terms of, how do the number of kids translate into staffing and how many more kids are needed to be able to get one more teacher. So they're very interested in that. So I think they could be quite supportive in an advocacy position to say, here's what we have, here's the number of kids we have, and how do we work together to provide service that we think we need for all our students. So very interesting. We've only met twice so far, and I bet you we won't meet again for another year. But in the meantime, I think there's going to be some conversations that will happen. And there were a few of the people at the meeting, in case I might have missed something. Watch the report. Okay.
I think that's a very fulsome report. Thank you, Trustee Black. Is there any other business? Are there any questions from anyone present on agenda items for this meeting? Any questions online?
No, there are not.
Seeing no questions, may I have a motion to adjourn? Trustee Hagan.
There it is.
There it is.